So I like it. No, I appreciate you guys, man. Thank you.
No. Thanks.
To the early Bellator days. And it seems like there was a huge difference in your mentality and in just your fighting style in general when you came to the UFC. You've always been super exciting, crazy, explosive. I could go on and on and on about the things that I love to watch you do, but what was it specifically that changed? Because it's like you got to the UFC and like it's almost like you're playing with house money. It's the weirdest thing. Like it's the coolest thing in the world to watch, but it's like you as soon as you came in, you signed the contract and just said, "Fuck it, I'm going."
Yeah. Well, I will say yes, I do. I've said this on record. I do feel like I'm in my second career now. I mean, guys, I could very, very easily be doing this interview signed with Bellator for the last 2 years because I just kept doing it. It made business sense. It made sense for me to make those decisions, and it never felt like the right time. But then when it did feel like the right time and the door was unlocked, I wanted to kick the door down, and I did. But with that being said, too, yes, I do think, you lose to one of those guys in Bellator, it's not so great, Now I'm fighting, that's part of it too. I mean, let's not forget I'm fighting the best guys in the world at 155 pounds. I mean, maybe if I'd fight a little bit more methodically, maybe if I would look for a brake pedal every now and then. I still haven't seen one my entire career. But foot on the gas, constantly in your face. But I do think there is just a freedom and a happiness and a joy and a peace and a contentment. As I said, it's not my job to go out there and entertain people. It's my job to go out there and win fights. So I get that when people give me that criticism, or even fellow fighters or analysts, former fighters, I get it. But sometimes it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks, and you go out there and the crowd gets a hold of you and you just have a blast.
It's fun though as well.
It is fun,
It's
but
fun.
it would be nice to win a couple more than I've won. Let's be honest.
Hey, but come on, everyone wants to be a fan favorite.
Yeah.
So many things I want to ask you. Of course, we're going to talk about the title fight next week in Australia and all the rest of it. But you mentioned Bellator there, and of course, I don't expect you to talk bad about them or anything like that. That's not what I'm looking for. But you're in a relatively unique position. There's lots of others that have done it, but we haven't done that, fighting for Bellator and the UFC, I mean. What are some of the main differences that you've seen? I'm assuming, and maybe I'm wrong, that one of the main things is kind of a level of recognition for what you do. Would I be correct in saying that?
That is, yeah. And that's not even, it's hard to even describe it, and while you also describe it.
And again, we're not here to knock Bellator. That's not what we're doing.
And I think people know me, and even the Bellator brass, I have seen them here and there. Like I've said things about Bellator, and quite frankly, in so many words, that the UFC, I just enjoy it better. Like, and it doesn't mean they were bad, and the UFC is, good, but the level of recognition is just absolutely astronomical compared to Bellator. And not to mention the fact that I have always poured my heart and soul into every single fight, whether I was fighting a guy that y'all have never heard of, or I'm fighting Vincent Henderson or Eddie Alvarez, one of these guys you had heard of back then. I'd show up to my fight and they're sending like the second string and third string media people from MMA Junkie and all these other people. I'm like, oh, where's Ariel? And hey, where's this guy? And where's, they're at the UFC event, and
John Morgan with the green t-shirt.
Exactly. John Morgan's at the UFC while there's, someone else at the Bellator fights. And these were bigger fights. I was always in the big fights in Bellator, but that was the number one thing. Number two, I do think there's a level of competition that is just different. It truly is. From a business side of thing or an organization side of things, I mean, the UFC is ran like a true sports organization, Fortune 500 company, not a skeleton crew where one guy is handling medicals and travel and he's fighter operations. I mean, there's departments. There's a travel department that's bigger than the entire Bellator staff in the UFC.
Right.
The PR department that's bigger than the entire Bellator staff. And that's nothing against them. It's just, that's the way that they run their business. Yeah. And for me, it was time to go test the waters, and it's worked out pretty darn well so far.
I heard someone that had been in Bellator before and then moved on to the UFC. Excuse me. I heard them say in an interview one time, it's nice when someone asks what you do for a living and you say, oh, I'm a professional fighter. And they say, oh, like the UFC? Like, no, it's like the UFC. I'm just not in the UFC. Like, that was like their difference between Bellator and the UFC.
Bro, hey, listen, the amount of times that happened to me, Or I'm walking through a casino in Las Vegas with like Ryan Bader, Gray Maynard, CB Dalloway. All these guys were Chris Weidman. All these guys were part of my management group, right? So I would hang out with these guys. The amount of times I had, hey buddy, can you hold my phone and take a picture of me and Gray Maynard?
Oh.
And then hey, you train with these guys? Well, my name's Michael Chandler, Bellator champion right now. You know, they're like, oh yeah, actually,
Oh,
they,
yeah,
you know,
you look familiar.
Yeah, it's like I don't say that to, like you said, crap on Bellator. It's just, you know, and I was a guy who was building my brand exponentially compared to everyone else. Like I was constantly trying to add value on social media to build the brand, constantly posting video workouts and all that kind of stuff and building my brand because Bellator just wasn't doing it for me, if you will. But I remember every single one of those interactions and how I felt. And now getting this opportunity to be on the platform that we call the UFC, that's just so much different, to give anything less than my best, like here, training, fighting, in the, you know, meeting a fan. I met a fan yesterday at the airport, talked to him for like 5 minutes. Like it's not, this is important to me because I know what it felt like to be overlooked. And I know what it felt like to be undervalued, underappreciated, underplatformed, if you will. So it's really served me really well. And truthfully, I do, like you said, Michael, I do have a very unique perspective because I truly don't believe UFC fighters on the roster who have only really known what the UFC is, they don't really truly realize what they have signed with the UFC. They don't realize what it's like on the other side. They do not know and they never will know. So I have that unique perspective.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we all come from a regional kind of circuit, but once you get to the big leagues, you think it's all like that. I remember going and cornering, and again, I'm not trashing Bellator, when I used to corner Kendall Grove, you know, and I was like, wow, it's a little bit different. This is kind of like a regional show, but with a TV deal, you know. Yeah. But anyway, we're not here to talk crap about them. I love all the different platforms for the fighters. Yeah. Who do you want next, Mike? We know you've been trying to angle for that Conor McGregor fight. I don't know if you know about Conor versus Tony on the Ultimate Fighter. Did you hear about that?
I did. Yeah, no, that was definitely just a tweet. I know for sure that was definitely just a tweet thrown out there to see if it gained any traction.
Oh, great. So we did a 30-minute segment on that earlier. Forget that, everyone.
No, it's all right. Confirmed. Tony Ferguson's just throwing stuff out there.
He's a maniac.
Obviously that's been in the talks. Obviously, everybody knows I would be down. Me, Connor, on tough, whether it be 4 or 6 weeks, however long, we will be filming that thing. The tension, the rivalry, the competition, the trash talk, just the animosity that will be built up, and then go into a training camp and then, you know, fight later on after the show. I want the fight. Everybody knows that. The fans want the fight. Dana has gone public saying he wants that fight. So the UFC wants the fight. I've actually heard from numerous UFC people that's the fight that a lot of people are talking about. Man, huge fight. Can you imagine the first round? Can you imagine the Foggy Dew and then my NF coming out on, and then we go out there and then just two dudes trying to finish each other in the first round? Massive.
Let me just ask you on that. I'm sorry, Anthony. I know it's your turn. I'm jumping the gun there. But you've seen McGregor lately. Yep. He's not looking like a 155er. You know, call it what you will. Call it supplements. Call it a rehab program. Call it good old-fashioned steroids. Call it whatever you will. Okay. Would that fight, in your mind, would you take it at 170 if you had to?
Absolutely. I mean, I actually have told myself, and you can go down to Florida and talk to my team, and I'm like, man, if I win this fight, I'm never fighting 155 again. Like, I mean, I'm walking around almost 190 right now. I mean, I'm not and I stay lean. I stay lean because I'm always training, and I got my walk-on fitness app that I've created that I'm coming out with new programs. So I'm constantly over here filming stuff and training, and I'm always in the gym. So I'm not getting fluffy or fat, and I'm always around that 185 to 190 clip. So, I mean, 170 for me would be a dream come true. I don't like making 155. The only reason I can make 155 is just good old-fashioned 12 weeks of diet, exercise, discipline, and a little bit of dehydration at the end. So why not do 170? I think Connor and I still think I'm bigger than Connor at this point, even with his regimen that he's been on.
You know, there's no way that we're going to get out of this without me having to. As soon as Michael brought up Connor, I thought of the promo that you cut on Connor, and I don't remember, like, just going back to like the earlier days when I first started watching. I don't remember the fire ass promos. But to be fair, like the platform wasn't exactly what it is right now, and the emphasis after those fights wasn't always on the interview; it was more on the fight, which is fine. But do you pocket those things, or because you're so well spoken, and like even as we're talking here, I'm like, damn, that's a great answer. But there's no way that was pocketed because he didn't know I was going to ask that question. So. Like, is that something you think about, like, as you're in training camp and there's certain things you want to say or points you want to get across?
Yeah, I mean, obviously in interviews and whatnot, I'm just, flying by the cuff. My couple promos that I've cut, I've definitely had them say, hey, I know I want to say this, this, and this, or I want to call this guy out. Cause I mean, and it all had great implications in it. Right. Cause and the last time I talked about, it was Gaethje and Oliveira who fought that night, right? Yeah, Gaethje and Oliveira who fought that night, and I talked about how people wanted to see me rematch either of those guys, and then if the UFC did have a momentary lapse of judgment, I want Conor McGregor. So I already know
a fire line. It's a fire line.
I already know what I'm going to say.
It's the delivery though, not just the line. The delivery, Mike. You commit to it 100%.
And Joe, I was like,
let's go. Come on, Mike. Give me some. Let's go. Come on. You're in the ring.
Joe.
You're in the ring. You've just knocked somebody out. I'm Joe Rogan. I'm handing you a microphone.
Exactly. That's what I said. I was like talking to the camera or talking to the microphone, and then it turned to Joe. And Joe, if the UFC does have a momentary lapse of judgment, and then what people really love that gives them chills is when I went, Conor McGregor. You had to give the big old sniff.
Big breath.
Big old sniff. That was not planned. That just happened. I think I almost went. I was about to pass out, so I had to get some air. But just calling out Conor, and obviously it's just he's the guy that I've wanted to fight. And it's yes, is it the red painted night? Is it the big payday? That's what everybody says, of course. But I mean, when you get into the sport of mixed martial arts, you want to try to win belts. You want to get the biggest stages, the brightest lights, the biggest platforms. And who else is there out there in the sport today? And possibly we may never see somebody like Conor McGregor again. And then when you start talking about, he's been very cordial with me on social media and said some things about me, and it's never in a trash talking way. You can have a legitimate rivalry and want to rip somebody's head off without also, calling them names or doing whatnot. So but the funny thing is, me and Conor being locked in a house together, not in a house together, but having to see each other multiple times a day, that'll bring something out of you,
Oh,
so,
yeah.
I mean, you did it, Michael. So I can only imagine.
I made a complete ass of myself.
No. Michael Bisping today, so that's all that matters, right?
Oh, no, I know. But I honestly, oh my God, I die inside when I see some more clips back. But still, but you are right. McGregor he's a whale, right? When it comes to stardom and all the rest of it. But that's because, regardless of whether or not he's lost a couple of fights recently, the man brings excitement. And that's exactly what you bring as well. So, yeah, take my money all day long. Next weekend, Islam Makhachev, Alexander Volkanovski. This is your weight division, right? Volkanovski's stepping up. How do you see this one playing out?
Man, it's very interesting because Islam has proven, aside from he's got one loss, right? The one time he got caught and clipped, just like we all can, right? Aside from that, he's looked very dominant, doing exactly what he wants to do, which is go out there, throw a couple punches, go out there, take you down, control you, submit you, or beat you up on the ground. He doesn't have, quite the ground and pound like, Khabib did. And I hate making the comparison of Khabib because that's what we always do, right? And the man deserves his respect. The man deserves to be Islam, not Khabib's training partner, Khabib's little brother, Khabib's underling, if you will. But with that style, he's just so dang strong. He's a lot taller than Volkanovski. So if this fight gets to the ground, Volkanovski's scrappy, but Islam is going to be something bigger, stronger, and different than Volkanovski has ever seen or felt. With that being said, Volkanovski, I mean, the way that he makes decisions on the fly in fights, changes up his game plan and changes up his style. He's so dominant in the offensive striking and defensive striking, counter striking. The wrestling is good. He's great everywhere. So you got a guy who really is the number one pound for pound guy in the world, who is very well versed against Islam, who is somewhat one-dimensional, but also has a nice big chip on his shoulder now too. You know, you get that gold belt put around your waist. He's a different Islam. It's similar to what I said about Charles Oliveira. Charles Oliveira resurrected his career after he got a couple wins and got that belt, and all of a sudden he turned into a guy that we never even thought was possible. So do we see the best Islam, and is he able to go out there and take him down? Or do we see Volkanovski just thwart everything? And, we see a hard-fought battle leading up to the 5th round where we're going into it 2-2. If I had to be a betting man, I think Islam has the edge. I do. Only because I do think Islam is so much bigger and so much stronger than Volkanovski is used to, even though Volkanovski used to be 200 pounds when he played rugby.
While you got your analyst hat on, because we do make that comparison with Khabib and Islam, and obviously you had your wants to fight Khabib, so I think you're pretty familiar with both of those guys. Who do you think is better? Who's the overall better fighter between the two of them?
Khabib.
Just more dominant wrestling?
I do think so. I mean, only because I don't think we haven't seen I don't know if I want to call it aggression. I think it's aggression. Like when Khabib fought and when he bear hugged somebody, it was aggressive. Like he wanted to break your spine. Islam, very effective, will take guys down, but it was like, I want to break your spine. Khabib, very active on top, constantly trying to catch a wrist and do damage. It wasn't, he went from brilliant wrestler, I want to break your back, to straight up sledgehammer, I want to punch a hole through your head. I don't exactly.
While trash talking.
Yeah, while trash talking.
Yeah, brother.
brother, like talking to Dana. I mean, that's stuff that we don't see. That is unheard of, right? So, so I don't say that, and I think there was a little bit of voice inflection there where it made it sound like Khabib was 10 times better. I don't think he's 10 times better than Islam, but in my book, Islam just hasn't proven that yet, because we got to see Khabib run through so many guys in such a dominant fashion that Islam just needs to, and I think Islam should be a little bit more aggressive on top and really, really look to be more dominant, he's definitely not I wouldn't call him a wet blanket, but he has more of that style where I'm going to hold this guy and I'm not thinking about beating the tar out of him like Khabib used to.
So let's talk about Islam then, because Khabib is retired, right? And anytime someone's retired, it's not fair to talk about them in a fighting sense. But let's just say outside of the octagon, Mike, right? You're walking through, I don't know, some university campus. You just walk into the wrestling room and there's Khabib. Islam. He's on the mat. He said, brother, you want to go for your rounds or whatever it is you guys do in wrestling? I'm joking. You versus Islam in a wrestling match. All-American, the pride of the USA, against Makhachkala's finest, reigning from Dagestan. Who wins in a wrestling match?
Mike, you're putting me in a bad spot here, because this is what always happens, because people are going to say, this guy just lost to Porier. Quit talking about Islam. Quit saying that you would beat him in a wrestling match.
This is what happens to us all. Every time Mike and I do this show, we get just blasted by media headlines and comments. We're the biggest pieces of shit out here.
No, so
we're bringing you in.
I'm not in a position to talk about how badly I would beat Islam in a wrestling match, but if I was going to wrestle Islam, I do believe just they're two completely different styles, and I didn't wrestle a lot of international, quite frankly, but I think with the Russian Dagestani guys that I have wrestled in my gym, that I am not saying hold a candle to Islam. It's a different style, but in my opinion, good old fashioned American Division I wrestling works very well against it, as long as you're able to withstand that hand fighting, because they are very strong. And I imagine Islam is very strong in that hand fighting category, where those guys just feel different when they grab you. It's less slick and it's more, but I think I beat Islam in a wrestling match. Now that's going to be a headline, and then everybody's going to say, there goes Chandler again talking about beating Islam, when really we just want to fight Conor. Right?
That's amazing. Man, what happens if the Conor fight doesn't come to fruition? Because I think this is what happens to a lot of guys, and it's not a you thing, it's a Conor thing. It's unfortunately for everyone in the division, whether that's 55 or 70, whoever Conor wants to fight is who's going to fight Conor. So if I'm Conor, be 100% honest with you, Michael Chandler is the completely opposite direction of anywhere I want to go. And that's just me being honest. I think it's a stylistic thing, but he also likes big fights and likes to put himself in precarious situations because I think that's what he needs to get up. So I think that could be like that could be a great thing for you.
Can I just jump in there though? He does have
chop the shit out of you.
No. I'm just piggybacking on that and just say Conor is extremely confident though. You know, look at what he's achieved. So he probably, I hear what you're saying. A management perspective might be like, avoid that guy.
For sure.
But in his mind, because fighters need protecting from themselves, he might be like, no, give me that guy. Let's go. Big fight.
He already fought me a couple of years ago. Chad Mendez, right? Just an overblown wrestler with an overhand right? Like a blown up wrestler.
Sorry, Anthony. Anthony, you were saying.
And I think that's a good point, Mike, that it's definitely like a coaching management kind of like, let's probably stay away from Michael Chandler. But I think Conor gets off on people telling him that he can't do something. So I'm really just trying to help out Mr. Chandler here by saying that I don't think he can do it.
For sure. And here's, and it's funny thing too, right? I do think, and people have said that, and trust me, I've had that thought where I'm like, yeah, I don't think I'm necessarily the easiest fight for Conor. There's some other fights out there. There's some big fights out there, guys who have,
I love Tony, but Tony's got a name and that's an easy fight for Conor. Like,
yeah, exactly.
If it's Michael Chandler or Tony Ferguson, the paycheck's the same. I know exactly where I'm going. You know what I mean?
But I'm with you. I truly think that Conor doesn't make him feel that. You know, if he's fighting Tony, it doesn't make him feel what he needs to feel. And I do think, and because I've said this to numerous people when they're like, he doesn't want to fight you. And I'm like, dude, because they said the same thing about because Conor, I guess the Khabib fight was a huge fight, but he should have never fought. He should have never wanted to fight Khabib. Like that's the toughest fight in the world. And it's a stylistic nightmare, but Conor likes the huge, bright lights. He has never shied away from competition, the brightest lights in the competition.
But on that, and I kind of want to get away from Conor because it's like we've been talking about him a lot this episode. Conor did pretty well against Khabib. Now, granted, it didn't go to a decision. Lots of people did, but he did pretty good. I mean, he got choked out, but those first couple of rounds, he was hard to take down in round one. To be fair,
very hard. Yeah. And he showed up, and I think showed a lot of people that he was a force.
I've got to give a balanced opinion because sometimes I rip on him a lot. You know what I mean? Because he does a lot of things that deserve ripping on. Anyway, away from that. Michael, we know you're an absolute savage inside the octagon. You're a tremendous wrestler. You're one of the most exciting fighters in the sport. You're articulate. You're intelligent. You're a wonderful family man. Love seeing all your stuff online. Tell me about Michael Chandler as a young man growing up. In where did he come from again?
He came from High Ridge, Missouri, man. A small town outside of St. Louis, Missouri, man. I lower middle class, outside of St. Louis. Father was a carpenter. Mom kind of helped with my grandpa's business. She kind of ran. She was like a secretary and then worked at his restaurants. I very much, was a small guy from a small town. I was taught to do small things. And I say that in succession because I was undersized. And I had people around me saying, don't go outside those county lines because you might fall flat on your face, and don't make a bunch of money because anybody who drives a car like that must be an a-hole, or anybody who gets to this level of fame or this level of, platform must have, nefarious dealings going on. Right. So I had to really battle that self-talk. I had to battle that self-image because, I mean, you guys have seen where I'm at now, right? It's like, this is a dream come true. If 18-year-old Michael would see where I'm at today, he would be absolutely blown away and probably feel extremely uncomfortable. So I've really had to will myself into being this, but wrestled in high school, wrestled in high school, wasn't a state champion, wasn't recruited anywhere, walked on to the University of Missouri, Mizzou wrestling, ended up becoming an All-American there. I had my big brothers there. My adopted big brothers, Ben Asker and Tyron Woodley, because I didn't have big brothers. And they were the reason I got into mixed martial arts. I had my first fight in August of 2009, and somehow here I am still doing this thing.
So you never had, were you a fan of the sport at all? Because I think my story, I wasn't nearly as good of a wrestler as you, but I came from a small town with super humble beginnings, no future in anything. Like Omaha, Nebraska was an hour away, and it might as well have been another country. You know what I mean? Yeah. So Did you ever watch MMA, or was it just Tyron and Ben Askren were just doing this cool thing, and you're like, well, I'll try that?
It's actually funny. So in college, I had my best friend and roommate, Raymond Jordan, ended up becoming an All-American, 2-time All-American, actually, from New Bern, North Carolina. He didn't have a car. So he would walk down to Blockbuster and get the old Pride and UFC VHS tapes and play them at our house. And that was the first time I had ever seen a fight. And he was a huge fan, knew who Fedor was, knew who Nogueira was. It's like, hey, you got to watch this fight. I'm like, I like wrestling and hand-to-hand combat. For some reason, I don't really like mixed martial arts that much. And then I started watching it a little bit, and I'm like, okay, this is kind of cool. But then you also saw, because to me back then, it was like, I don't know if these guys are making any money. Is that a real career, or is that, guys just fighting in Japan or whatnot? Then when Tyron and Ben started fighting, and I started going to their fights, or Tyron would be fighting and going down to ATT and coming back to Mizzou and wrestle with us a little bit, and like, hey, let's do some jiu-jitsu, or I wouldn't hold mitts for him, but I would watch him get mitts held for him by some local guy. And that's when I started thinking, okay, well, shoot, now Tyron's making a little bit of money, and then Ben came in, started making a little bit of money, and they were going to make a career out of it. So I was like, well, I'll try it. So drove down to Lake of the Ozarks, Missouri, which is about an hour and a half away, and fought in front of like 17 people for like $500. And there you go.
So at that point, you'd never really trained any boxing or anything like that. What about, most young men get into a few scraps growing up? Were you a scrappy kid?
No, I had never been in a street fight. I was too afraid to get in trouble. I was too afraid to get in trouble. I've heard your stories, and I'm like,
no. No, see, I thought you were going to say you were too afraid of getting hit. Right, no. Too afraid of getting in trouble. That's beautiful. I mean, and I wish more young, that's an example you should follow. I thought you were going to say afraid of getting into a fight. I'm going to say compared to who you are today and the style that you have. No, it's beautiful, man.
I'm definitely never afraid of that. Like probably to my own detriment, but but that makes it even more impressive what you've achieved, Mike. It really does. Let me ask you this: Anthony Smith. When I started doing this podcast with him, I found out that the man has a bunch of cattle. He has camels. He has a bunch of very, very exotic animals that blew my mind. He's always buying something weird and silly. Tell us something about yourself that might surprise us or the people listening right now. That's actually great. Well, first of all, what I usually say is that I've owned a professional bull, like a professional bucking bull. Actually, I've owned two with a guy named.
You still got it?
No, not anymore. But But at one time we had two different bucking bulls. One named Molly Hatchet, like the old band, and then one named Uppercut, and with a professional bull rider named LJ Jenkins, who is since retired, but he's known as one of the best kind of bull minds and bull. He had one of the best bull eyes as far as like seeing a good bull, and then now he's raising them. But to stay on the exotic animal track, my wife, I actually inherited a zebra when I married her. So there's an exotic animal farm a little bit south of Columbia, Missouri called Lolly Brothers. And my father-in-law has a zebra along with two horses on his ranch in Missouri. So I go back and see Zeb the zebra every now and
then. Michael Chandler and I are meant to be best friends.
Exactly.
And we just figured this out.
Yes.
Did we just become best friends? Hold on. Michael Chandler, don't say anything. Anthony, did we just become best friends? What movie is that?
Step Brothers. See, I got one.
Okay. I got a little thing that we do in the show, Mike. He doesn't watch any movies.
Oh, he's one of those guys. That's good. Yeah. I like those guys though too. I mean, like I like the guys who can really pull out the one-liners from the movies, but then I also like the guy where like, you seriously haven't seen that movie?
Yeah. There's a place for me here, Mr. Business.
I've got a life. I don't watch juvenile movies. But Anthony, how jealous are you that you don't have a zebra?
I don't have a goddamn zebra. Okay. For the longest time, I wanted to go to Texas and get a tiger because my brother knows like 5 people that have tigers. I just can't get away with it here in Nebraska. I just can't because I'm not in Texas, but I could definitely have a zebra. I'm going to have to look into a zebra.
Yeah, actually, so not far from you, Michael. Where are you at, Anthony? Are you still in
Omaha? I'm in Omaha.
You're still there. So I was just in Temecula. You know where Temecula is? Obviously?
Oh, yeah, that's 30 minutes from where I am.
Okay, so we just did this event this past weekend. Tim Kennedy was there. We did, it's called Operation Black Site, where we teach people self-defense and small arms training and all that kind of stuff. But we brought the real Tarzan in. You know who that is from Instagram? The real Tarzan. He does all these animal things.
Yeah. He's like a real ripped black guy.
Yeah, Mike Holston, but he goes by the real Tarzan. We had camels, we had alpacas, we had ostriches. There's a 26-acre ranch in Temecula that they've now turned into kind of an exotic petting zoo farm as well. So
what does that guy do? Because the only thing I ever see him do is hang out with super hot chicks, and he'll just be having like a Komodo dragon walking through his living room or something. Yeah. It's the craziest thing.
Yeah, so he literally has become, one of the most influential, biggest platform just animal lovers on the planet, right? Mm-hmm. And he does a lot of philanthropy and raising awareness for poaching and just all of the different animal causes, right? As well as, some of the kind of save the earth, the plastics and all that kind of stuff as well. Like just a solid dude who made his passion animals. And also I heard him explain it on a podcast where he's like, most people are afraid of snakes. That's like one of people's biggest fears. So my biggest love became snakes because I want to take away people's fear or dampen people's fear of snakes. He brought out like 2 20-foot reticulated pythons to a group of like 40 people. They were slithering around on the mats with us this past weekend. And it was like, he's made that mission. And then obviously he brings sponsors on, and that's how he makes his living.
So I'm not exactly scared of snakes, but my son, he has a tarantula, he has a bearded dragon, he loves animals. He wanted to get a snake, right? And I said, no, because people that have snakes are weirdos, okay? When I grew up, anyone that had a pet snake in a tank was a weirdo. Where do you stand on this, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not my cup of tea. I mean, it's definitely like... I mean, I barely wanted a dog like lately, mainly because I'm just busy as heck. But like, yeah, I'm not a big reptile guy. It was cool to hold the snake. I mean, we're talking like 15, 20 foot around my neck. And it was kind of cool for a second, but I don't know enough about it, nor do I have the time or the know-how to. It was cool for a moment. And he brought out a Komodo dragon or something like that. But I wouldn't say they're weirdos. I would just say that their interests are a little bit weirder than mine.
They're individuals. Or producer Mike Harrington, I believe he put a tweet out. So Harrington, come and join the show, please, my friend. And a few questions from the fan base.
What's up, Iron Mike?
All those coming in, man. Tons of them.
Yeah, there actually was a lot. Yeah, like hundreds and hundreds. So Harrington I'm assuming you've scoured them with a fine-tooth comb to find the most intellectual questions, of course. Mm-hmm.
Yes. I figured I would lob you up a softball to begin with. Better wrestling program, Mizzou or Penn State?
Gosh, man.
You're going to make him pick against his.
Yeah, logically, Penn State is just freaking so dang good. But obviously, I'll believe black and gold to the day I die. But Penn State is a better program, let's be honest. But Mizzou's on its way.
All right. Hell yeah. Okay. Let's see here. Emilio wants to know, what's the biggest takeaway from having 2 boys now instead of 1? And what kind of advice would you give someone who's always trying to work out?
Great question. So as far as the boys go, man, just the dad guilt that that they don't tell you about before you have kids. It adds a little bit to that, not to dampen the mood, but like, the guilt of like, have I done enough? Am I doing enough? Am I raising these boys right? But also bringing in the second also makes you very, very thankful for the first, because obviously he's not your only child anymore, but then he's going through the growing pains of, hey, do you even love me anymore? It seems like you got to take care of this little blob of cryingness all the time, right? So the jealousy stuff comes in. So you're just kind of dealing with these new little challenges. But having 2 gives you double the purpose and double the why. I love it. And then as far as somebody who works out all the time, show yourself the grace that you're not going to have great days every single day. Just making sure you do something, and the number on the scale isn't the most important thing as long as you're feeling the best you possibly can.
All right, hell yeah.
One more, Harrington.
Oh, one more. All right, I gotta do this then, just because we had, I don't know, roughly 40 of these come through. Michael, what do you think of Arman Tsarukyan's recent call out? What he said about you having the lowest fight IQ, and how do you think a matchup between the 2 of you would go?
I didn't respond because I haven't even seen him fight. So not disrespecting or whatever.
Shade thrown. Whoa.
That's the most disrespectful thing I've ever heard. Like, listen, I don't even know who the fuck he is.
Well, that's not what I said.
Who the fuck is that guy?
I know he fought Gamrot. Like I haven't really seen Gamrot fight either. I mean, I appreciate the call out. That's exactly what I would do if I was him. But like, no thanks, man. You know, so I haven't even. I'm over here talking about Conor and Tough. You think I'm worried about freaking Arman Tsarukyan with a silent T at the beginning of his name?
I was going to say Tsarukyan with a T.
Just Tsarukyan.
Hey, so when I seen that before
it was a good call out. Good for him though. He was coming at me, but that's not how you get a fight, dude.
It was a great call out, but I disagreed with what he said when I read it. And I almost wanted to respond because I sat there ringside right behind Rogan and watched you fight Porier.
Yep.
And so I think I said this on the post show that I could see the internal battle that you were having with yourself. Like you see, I think you get this fight IQ argument all the time. Like he doesn't have a fight IQ. I watched you know the right decision to make and then purposely go the other direction because that was more exciting and more violent and more.
Which one? When?
With Porier.
When?
Like the would have been the second round. Second round.
Second round, I took him down and held him down the whole time, right?
Was it the first round you got the takedown and then he started to scramble up and instead of Matt returning him, you decided to let him go so you could land a big shot?
Yeah, well, I think regrettably, as a world class wrestler, I would say, or at least a world class American wrestler, and a guy who like had one of the coolest suplexes ever on Benson Henderson. Mm-hmm. That was a really crappy mat return. I think I was like half suplex. Oh wait, it's a mat return. Oh wait, my foot kind of rolled a little bit, and I basically lost balance and fell, and I was not happy about that. So maybe that's what you're talking about.
And it could be. It just like I can see watching you that like. I could see you getting wrapped up into the moment and just living in the moment you guys were in. And then in the second round, like, all right, there's the game plan. All right, let's get the takedown. Let's win the position that we're in right now. I don't know. I just never have agreed with the fight IQ part of it. I think there's other battles going on there. And of course you can't say all that in a tweet. So I didn't want to, that's his business.
Yeah. Well, number one, thank you for almost coming to my defense. And number two, thank you for saying what you said here. I appreciate it because, I mean, it's also awesome too. I mean, it's beautiful that people can sit there in their armchair quarterback position and say, this guy should have made this decision or make that decision. And we're making split second decisions,
right?
With the best information that we have, or making split second bad decisions when, I mean, it's just, it's part of it, man.
But isn't that beautiful, Mike? Because the sport has grown so much that we experience that these days. You know what I mean? Obviously, with the exposure comes the good and the bad. We'll let you go on this, and thanks for your time, Mike. Really, really appreciate it. Wonderful talking to you, getting to know you a little bit better. And I'm sorry if I put you on the spot a little bit here, but I feel like you'd be the type of guy that has something good to say about this. First of all, let us know about this fitness app that you're working on. So please tell us all about that. But also, we have a lot of men, obviously young men that watch this podcast, and we have a nice little community. And we often have questions that come in from people that are struggling in life. They're struggling to find their place. They don't know what to do with themselves. They're maybe going through depression or something like that. What would you say to a young man out there that's kind of lost, that's struggling to find his way in life, that, trying to turn things around? Have you got any words of wisdom? I feel like you have.
I do. Yeah, no, thank you for asking. First of all, my fitness app, people have been talking to me about it for years. I put all these workouts on Instagram, like, hey, when are you coming out with your programs? I finally did it, walkonfit.com, and we have an app, Walk On Fitness. But, and that will in turn also have a diet and a mindset component. I'm sitting here in my studio. I got my microphones here. Like I get on the mic and I want to bring value to people because I do think, anybody who's struggling with self-image or doubt or depression, I've dealt with all of these things. Imagine the cognitive dissonance of a guy who sits here and tells people that I want to be a world champion and be under the bright lights, which comes with the lights, the money, the fame, all the things that I say that I want. Yet I still have this little guy from the little town telling me, no, you shouldn't do that. That makes you a bad person. Who are you to go out there and do those things? And I've even had seasons of my life, guys, when I've been on top of the world, where I've been at my lowest point because the devil and the enemy is always coming to kill, steal, and destroy, especially when you are at your best and when you're at the top of the mountain. That's when you're at your most vulnerable, because he knows right where your chinks in your armor are. And the best thing that you can do when you lose that clarity, when we talk about depression, we talk about lack of self-image, we talk about, I don't know what to do next. A lot of times it's a clarity problem. And breaking the trust to yourself day in and day out by not doing the things that you need to do or not checking enough things off of the list that you need to get done to make yourself successful is the easiest way to get yourself out of that slump. So a couple of practical things. I had a rough go after this fight because of the fight and then some other things that I'm kind of just going through, lack of clarity, right? Whenever I started taking control of my day, waking up earlier than my family, waking up at 5:45, getting in my devotional, visualizing and getting in my journal and saying thank you every morning and thank you every night. And then I'm doing things like my cold plunges, doing things like making sure I'm working out, making sure I do these certain things that I can check off the list. Is journaling going to make me the best in the world, or waking up at 5:45? Is that really going to make a huge difference for me in my life? I don't know. For me, it has, but it's one thing that I can check off the box. I can check off the list that says I can trust Michael Chandler. I can trust me to get this, this, and this done, because as you guys have seen, the brightest lights, your greatest moment of opportunity, you have to be able to trust yourself. And if you can't trust yourself in the small things, you're never going to be able to trust yourself in the huge, the large, the exponential, under the brightest lights. So a lot of times it's depression and lack of self-image, or the pain or the self-deprecating thoughts because of lack of clarity. So give yourself permission to check off the boxes every single day by practical little things that you can do to gain trust in yourself and watch it compound itself. Because if you want to be trusted in the big things, you have to first be trusted in the small things.
Wow.
Love that.
Very well said. Love it.
That.
I mean, as you say there, it's all about routine and discipline to a certain degree. It really is. I think that's a beautiful place to end, Mike. Thank you very much on behalf of myself, Anthony, all the believers. Anthony can speak for himself. He's like, shut up, Bisping. I can say thank you. Mike, can't wait to see you back in the octagon doing what you do. I believe you and Anthony are teaming up on the post-fight or the pre-fight show there soon.
Yeah, are you there on the 9th, the February 9th?
Yeah, in Bristol.
Nice. Yeah, I'll be up there too.
Yeah, I'll be there. Yeah, we should.
We'll talk about zebras and stuff.
Perfect. Let's do it.
Zebras. My zebra.
Yeah, perfect. I can't wait.
Amazing. Well, you're the man,
Thanks
Mike.
so much,
Take care, buddy. Thanks again for joining us. And we'll see you soon.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Take care, brother.